experts tell us that over the next couple decades, the United States is going to experience a significant shortage in workforce, individuals, especially trained folks, associate's degree people. A couple of weeks ago, I had Dean Lauder from Itawamba Community College, who is the Dean of Economic and Community Services. And I thought in order to get a full picture, we would bring in the Dean of Career and Technical Education. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce to y'all Mr. Barry Emison, who is Dean of Career and Technical Education at Itawamba Community College. Barry and I served together for a number of years at ICC before I retired and moved on to Sanctuary Hospice House. But Barry's been at Itawamba Community College for 25 years. And as I said, he serves as Dean of Career Technical Education. He started off his career at Itawamba as a tool and die and precision machinist instructor. And he did that for a number of years. He received an associate's degree from Itawamba in tool and die. He's also a graduate of Mississippi State with a BS degree in industrial technology. And he has a master's degree from the University of Mississippi in higher education. He's won numerous awards, both as a teacher and as an administrator. He's a great guy. I consider him a dear personal friend. He's got an analytical mind. He's a visionary. And when I was at Itawamba, he had the dubious task of chauffeuring me to dean's meetings. I couldn't ever remember which campus the meeting would be on that month, whether it be Belden or Tupelo or Fulton. And Barry's predecessor, Tony Tice, started picking me up, calling and picking me up, and then taking me to the meetings. And when he retired, he told Barry that one of his tasks would be to make sure you get Plunkett to the meetings. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Barry, who is going to catch us up on things that are going on in career and technical education. Barry?
Okay, thank you, Harold. And thank all of you. Good afternoon, and thank all of you for having me. We always appreciate an opportunity when we can come and talk about things happening in career and technical education, especially at Itawamba Community College. So I have a PowerPoint. I hate to bore you with a PowerPoint, but there's some numbers that I want you to be able to see, and I don't want you to have to see my face. Although I did enjoy seeing some familiar faces among you. So when Harold invited me to speak, I asked him if he had a topic in mind, and he suggested I talk about trends in career and technical education and some of the good things that the college is doing in that area, in that regard. And so, you know, I thought about it a lot, and I kept coming back to that same old tired topic about skills gaps. And probably all of you have heard that, and you're probably more than tired of hearing about skills gaps. We've been hearing about it for a very long time. But I kept coming back to that because it is still very relevant. In fact, it's getting more and more relevant. As Harold said, all the experts say that we're going to experience even greater shortages. And the numbers point that out. And so Harold's information is correct. So in case you don't know about what a skills gap is, the overwhelming agreed upon definition is a disparity between the skill sets that employers are looking for and the skill sets that potential employees have. But I'd like to offer a little bit of a different spin on that and say that it's actually an inadequate pipeline of skilled technicians. And the reason I say that is because we are very much in tune at the college, and I think at all the community colleges across the state, with what our industry partners need. We have, many of you are on our advisory committees, and each program has to meet twice a year, and we welcome your input, and we want you to actually offer it even when we don't ask for it, and tell us what you need, and we work with you very closely, and you become partners with us in this educational experience. And so we think we have a good idea, and we have a very good system, especially here at Itawamba. We've had a lot of support from a lot of people, from Board of Trustees, the president, and all the administration down, and then all the way up to our legislators to provide us with funds to help provide the most technological equipment that we can. And so I think we do a pretty good job of preparing those individuals. The issue is that we're not graduating enough, and I'm going to show you that. So Jeannie, if you'll go to that next slide. I want to start by recounting a true story that I heard 25 years ago from a man that the college brought in to speak to us, and he was the dean of a college at some university that I can't recall, but nonetheless, he tells it as a true story that he walks into his office suite and he's barking about something, and he's got a piece of paper in his hand, much like this young lady does on the screen, and he's popping that paper with his hand, and he's talking about how ridiculous it is, and anyone throughout that office, down that hallway, that would stop him and ask him, he was more than happy to let him know what he was complaining about. And when he got to the end of the hallway, his 75-year-old secretary reached her hand up and said, "Glenn, what are you fussing about?" So he was happy to hand her the paper and say, "Can you believe that? $100 an hour for an auto mechanic? That's ridiculous." And she handed it back to him and said, "You know, you're right, that is ridiculous. Why didn't you just fix it yourself?" And so I think we all know why he didn't fix it himself. The same reason most of us don't fix our own cars. You know, if you don't have an appreciation for career technical, for skilled trades, then you will when your AC unit goes down in Mississippi, typical August day in Mississippi, or when your car breaks down, or when you go to the hospital and you need that nurse or that respiratory therapist assistant to come and take care of you. So we usually have a pretty good appreciation for skilled trades when we need them. So Jeannie, that next slide. Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, most of you probably have seen him and watched his show from time to time. He testified in front of Congress basically to advocate for increased investment in workforce development. And there's a quote there that I hate to read to you, but I just want you to know that he said that a few years from now, an hour with a good plumber is going to cost you more than an hour with a good psychiatrist. And he said at that point, we'll be in need of both. And so he's not wrong. Most of you probably read the paper as I do, and you will find at least weekly and sometimes bi-weekly, you will see articles in the paper referring to our workforce development efforts and things that are going on. If you listen to our governor speak, or you listen to most politicians speak, they talk a lot about skilled trades, and they talk a lot about workforce development, because especially in economic development, workforce development is paramount and on the forefront. So a few years ago, Jay Hughes from Oxford came over and talked to us. And Harold, I don't know if you were in that meeting or not, but Jay said, he came in and he said, "Well, the first thing I want to see is your plumbing program." And I thought about that when I put this slide in here. And I said, "Well, Representative, we don't have a plumbing program." And he said, "I know you don't. My plumber makes $75 an hour and he's getting ready to retire, and I don't know who's going to replace him." And so I talked to a man last week that came through and toured our building facility, who said he had 2 houses ready to be built and couldn't get a plumber, and didn't know where he was going to get an electrician when he did get the foundation finally poured. So we're beginning to feel what other parts of the country have felt for a long time. So that next slide, Jeannie, I think points out that there really is a skills gap. And so I want to point out some in particular. And this was a report that I received in the last month or so from some research done by those fine folks that you see at the bottom, that shows the number of jobs. Now this research was done from 2017 to 2019, so 3 years, 2017, 18, 19, with the peak being 2018. The numbers that you're looking at right there for jobs and graduates are 2019 numbers. And so For an industrial maintenance technician, there were 470 jobs statewide and only 180 graduates from the 15 community colleges out of their industrial maintenance technology program. So that is a significant gap, and that gap represents, I don't know if you can see the percentage on the side, but that represents 62% gap, meaning we only are preparing enough students in our 15 community colleges to satisfy 38% of the jobs in industrial maintenance technology. So where are those other positions going to be filled? How are manufacturers and how are industry going to fill these other positions? Well, they can advertise and try to steal from someone else, or they can try to steal from out of state, or they can try to grow their own. And I'll talk about growing their own in just a minute. Growing their own is a great idea. It's worked for many, many decades, but there's also a problem with that. So, and I thought that when I looked at this study, that industrial maintenance technician would be the greatest, because I hear about that all the time, because it is such a critical skill, especially in manufacturing. But actually the greatest need was in precision machining and manufacturing, where there's an 81% gap. An 81% gap. 81% of the jobs out there in precision machining and manufacturing across the state of Mississippi aren't being filled, okay, by the graduates. There's not enough graduates. That's the gap that you see. Now, this was advanced manufacturing. I'm going to hit the 4 sectors. Many of you were involved in the study, the research, and the meetings that we had, that we came to a consensus in the Three Rivers Workforce Development District as to what the 4 primary critical sectors are in that district. And so I'm going to hit those 4 sectors. So, Jeannie, if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see it doesn't get a lot better in healthcare. A significant decrease or gap, I guess you would say, between the graduates that our community colleges are producing and the jobs. So from 58% to PTA, all the way up to 86% in medical sonography. Now, I should mention, back to that previous slide, those are programs that Itawamba Community College has. We have programs in each of those 4 areas and many more. So we're providing graduates to our local industry, but we're just not providing enough. We don't have all of these programs. We don't have medical sonography, but we are researching medical sonography. Harold could tell you that that is a very expensive program to run. And then we also have to look at striking a balance between, is that a sustainable program? And Harold knows, because we had a program here at Itawamba and we had to close it because eventually we had kept out. We had filled all the positions. But we're now finding that sonography machines are in various clinics and not just in hospitals. And so the need is greater. There's only one program in the state. I think it's Hines. And so we're researching if we can add that program or not. So that next slide, Jeannie. Information technology was the other one of the other sectors that we looked at, that we identified as critical. Again, all the way from a 34% gap in jobs and graduates and data analysts to a 92% in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one of those new ones. We don't have a cybersecurity program, but we're looking at it. We have a couple of components in our network security program in cybersecurity, but that's one of those new areas that who knew even 10 years ago that we were going to need to guard against cybersecurity. That was going to be a huge job market. I saw research the other day that said that 65% of the jobs that Generation Z will perform don't exist today. And so when you see some of these things that you don't know what they are, or you've never heard of them, it's because they didn't exist back when we were researching careers and figuring out what we wanted to do with our lives. So on the next slide, we get into the last sector that we identified as being critical in our area, and that's logistics and distribution, all the way from a 55% gap up to a 97% gap. And we don't have a couple of those, but we do have diesel technician and commercial truck drivers. I get to give a lot of presentations about this very topic, and I like to use an inverted funnel, because some of you are saying, well, Barry, that's a pretty easy fix. If you can just, won't you just create more, just provide, develop more graduates? Well, if you take a funnel and you turn it upside down, so you take an inverted funnel and you got the small end on top and the big end on the bottom, the small end on top would represent the number of people going into these disciplines. And then the big end at the bottom are how many jobs they have to go to. And that's great for these graduates of in these disciplines, because guess what? Their pay is skyrocketing. So I think that shows there is a skills gap by my definition, that we are not producing enough students and graduates into that pipeline. So supply and demand is something we all understand, and we don't have enough supply for the demand of jobs that we have. So on the next slide, I ask, why is there a skills gap? Well, I submit to you that, for one thing, the job world has changed. So back in the day when I entered the workforce as a teenager, a person could go into a job, a low-skill job, although most of us during that time had skills that we learned around the farm and learned around home and working on our own cars and doing things for ourselves. And that's a little different today, seems like. But we could go to work somewhere, and if we showed potential, we worked real hard and we learned that job, they would give us opportunities to learn another job, and eventually we could work our way up into that company. Well, it's not quite the same anymore, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One thing, as I mentioned, most kids today don't have the skill set that most of us had when we were growing up and we went to work. They don't have in many cases, they don't have the work ethic that we'd like for them to have. But you know, there's just not that. Those kids don't have that, and so when they get there, there's just a lot for them to have to learn. And to be perfectly honest with you, most kids don't want to do it. That has caused manufacturing, especially, to turn to technology, and I'll talk more about technology in a minute. But low-skill jobs have gone away because of that. Low-skill jobs have also gone away because I don't know if you've looked at our workforce participation rate in this state lately, but we're hovering around 50% of those that are capable of working. Only about 50%, a little over 55% of those are actually working. And so when you look at the unemployment rate, those are the numbers of individuals that are still actively looking, right? And so because of that, and the fact that low-skill jobs have steadily decreased, so that now we're getting close to the 10% of all jobs are low-skill jobs. And so that has pushed companies to move to technology. And they've had to do that to remain globally competitive, for sure, but also because they couldn't get that low-skill person. Okay, so now what happens when a company moves to technology? Statistics show that at least 45% of all manual tasks that are being done today can be completed with current technology. So we already have the technology to do that. And so companies started investing in that technology. And so there would be 10 low-skill jobs that would be replaced with 1 or 2 middle-skill jobs in robotics or in automation control or in CNC programming and machining and those kinds of things. And so I want to tell you a story about a man, and I'm not going to mention his name only because I didn't ask him if I could, but he was overseeing a large project, and he needed a PLC programmer, and he called me one day and he said, Barry, do y'all teach PLC programming? I've interviewed 6 or 8 electrical engineers, and we're putting in this brand new system citywide, and I need a PLC programmer. And I've interviewed 6 or 8 electrical engineers, and I'm going to ask them that question. They don't. They know the concept behind it. They know how to design a system with it, but they don't know how to program a PLC. And I said, Johnny, I'm sorry I told you what his name is, but we do that every day. And so we sent him a couple of students to interview, and he hired one of them as an electrical engineer because what he really needed was someone to do the skill. So you see a number there, or you see 1 to 2 to 7, right? So for every one job that requires a master's degree or above, so we're talking doctors and lawyers and CPAs and those positions, there are 2 jobs that require a bachelor's degree. So engineers, architects, okay, school teachers. There are 7 that require a skill set that they can get somewhere. And in most cases, universities tend to lean more toward theory and lean more toward teaching concepts rather than hands-on, and that's where we come in. So that next slide says University for All. We have been pitching University for All for a couple of decades now, I guess, right? Everybody ought to go get a 4-year degree in something. In fact, I would say 2 decades ago, it doesn't matter what you get it in, just go get a 4-year degree, right? I'll tell you, the #1 major at Itawamba Community College is undecided. The number, and I don't know why we expect anything less. We expect our 18-year-olds to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their life, you know, right then and there. Most of them will change that major. The #2 major is business administration. And business administration is a very good degree program, but most of those that are in business administration, I'll say half of those anyway, are basically undecided. So they don't really know what they want to do. I had a mother that called me about 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and she just really called to find out why her son might want to go into a career education field. And she said, I wanted to go into business. And so when I said, well, why do you want to go in business? And she said, well, we live in Manatee, and a good friend of ours is Dwayne Thornton. He has a business, so I want my son to have the opportunity to do that. And I said, well, I know Dwayne very well, and Dwayne would probably tell you that, yes, I could have used a business degree when I started my business. I could have used at least some business classes in accounting and how to start a corporation and that kind of thing. But if I didn't have a tool and die background, there wouldn't be a business to go into. And so the skill came first before the business did. And so I told her that, and then I called Dwayne and told him that was a quote of his, because I don't think he knew it. So you take that same funnel that I have inverted for skilled trades and turn it back up right, and that's how many people we have at the top, the big end, going into these university majors and these academic majors. And then at the bottom are how many jobs there are. So it's a very lucrative position. On that next slide, I don't know that you're aware, but so I want you to know, and you can go get this information yourself off of the MDES website. These are publications. This is the 2020 Occupational Employment Wage Estimates. And so the average wage for a machinist, go ahead and go to that next slide, Jeannie. Remember these are the gaps, right? Remember how many job openings there are for high school students that want to come major in this in college. Now go to the next slide, Jeannie, and it's just a repeat of the first one. So they can, as a machinist, they can make on average $24.53. Industrial maintenance mechanics $23.19. I can tell you those numbers are low for our area. And so I'll tell you, we do something here. When we talked about grow your own, and I talked about the challenges with companies doing that, about 4 years ago, we approached companies and said, we want you to join in and do something that Toyota's doing. Toyota helps themselves out by growing their own. And the way they do that is they have a program called the AMT program, where they actually hire students in our industrial maintenance technology program. They usually get 12 students a year, and they start them to work immediately building cars while they're going to school in industrial maintenance. Then, after about a semester of that, they put them in industrial maintenance team. And so for 3 semesters, they're getting what we provide for them at school, and then they're getting reinforcement at work 3 days a week. And so we've started internships now in all of our programs in these 4 sectors. And in order to get companies to help do that, we are subsidizing that through the help of Three Rivers Planning and Development and Community Development Foundation. And we're subsidizing that $6 an hour. If they'll pay at least $12 an hour, then we'll subsidize that $6 an hour of that. Most of them are paying around $14, $15 an hour. By the way, if you have any high school kids, that Toyota AMT program, they start them out at $16.50 an hour. When they graduate, they're making $19.50 an hour, and then they have an opportunity to compete for jobs at Toyota or elsewhere. And the Toyota job pays about $24, $25 starting out. Top pay, by the way, in machining, industrial maintenance, is somewhere around $35 an hour. So it's very lucrative job fields, and most of these are stepping stones toward higher jobs. Most of their promotions will occur from these skilled trades. So the next slide, I show you the pay scale for some of the health science programs that we looked at earlier. My daughter is an occupational therapist, and her starting salary out of a 5-year master's program from the University of Mississippi out of Jackson was not much more than that $29-21 average salary right there for an OTA person with only a 2-year program. And that OTA person typically doesn't have any student loan debt. So the next slide is our logistics. That's automotive and diesel mechanics. Still very good salaries, and I'll tell you, you want these guys to be really well trained. We had about a year ago, we had a guy that came here, our HR manager from Mercedes plant over in Alabama, and he said that the new Mercedes that they're building has over 100 onboard computers on it. So you don't just want any shade tree mechanic working on that unless they've been trained in this high technology. So the next slide, I just want to show you the programs that we have at the college, and I'll give you that link so you can go look at it. Each of these have a drop down so that it explains what each of them are and gives you a prospective salary for each of them. We have 17 programs. We've added robotics and automation this fall. We're adding a new program in construction management. Next fall, we're also looking at frontline leadership, and so we're constantly on the lookout for new programs. Next slide shows the health science programs that we have, and as I said, we're looking at sonography and looking to see if we can add that program there. So I welcome you to go out there and look at those. I understand, and you can go to the next slide, which is my last one, Jeannie. I understand that skilled trades is not for everyone, but we need to understand that university 4-year degree program is not for everyone either, especially right out. It wasn't for me, and as Harold mentioned, I started with a 2-and-a-half degree and then worked my way into the other degree programs. So that's all I have. I just wanted to share a little bit with you about what the trends are in with the skills gap, and I'll open it up now if any of you have any questions. I don't know if I can answer them or not, but Harold's my backup, by the way. He knows all about this.
Well, I have a question for you, Barry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
In terms of the graduation gap, that is not having enough skilled workers to fill positions, it seems to be one of the problems is limited capacity. If you want to, for example, welding's a hot program. If you want to add, let's say, 6 more welding setups, you've got to add, another 1,000 square feet plus buy all the equipment, and that's really expensive. So limited capacity is one of the issues. And the other one, as you mentioned, even if you have the capacity to take more students, a lot of the students they're either interested in not going to college at all, or they want that 4-year degree, and attracting people to those 2-year degrees where they're not going to have college debt that's going to follow them for the next 15 years, and they're going to start at a real good pay and a real good job in the local community. How do we attract more students to those programs, and how do we make it more aware?
Well, those are great questions, Harold, and you're uniquely familiar with our situation here at the college, and we are limited in space. We're limited in faculty to teach them. If the demand is there, and I've shown you that the demand is there, then in most cases we would look at whether or not it is feasible for us to try to help fill that demand. And so, we have night programs. We've looked at offering a PN program on the weekends and at night, and we've looked at offering welding programs at night. You know that in health science there is a pretty good pipeline of individuals interested in those programs. We don't have that same situation in most career programs that are not health related, and so that's the issue. if we take 12 students every semester in welding. If we had 24 that were interested in it and that had everything done, we would try to figure out a way. We'd run a night program. Maybe we could hire another instructor. There are some things that we could do. Maybe we start a new welding lab. But individuals not being interested in it is because of the influence, and this is my opinion, and the opinion of some others that you may hear from, may have heard from, is that for 2 decades now, most everyone who tries to influence high school students on where to go after high school, they've been trying to influence them to go get a 4-year degree. And so that's just been the mentality. And so they basically end up thinking that I'm going to go get a job because I'm tired of school, or I'm going to go get a 4-year degree. And what we're finding is that the job that they get is not going to pay them a life-sustaining wage. And that's why we're trying to catch them and trying to get them to take a look at these 2-year programs that, hey, in our 5 district, they can come to school for free, right, with our tuition assistance programs. And we'll get them an internship. We can get them an internship that we'll subsidize, and they can start making $14, $15 an hour as an 18-year-old, and that is just unheard of. And so that's what we're trying to do, is get the word out so that we can increase the bottom side, the small end of that inverted funnel, because the jobs are there. And we have 5 industrial maintenance technician instructors. We'd love to increase that to 7 or 8 or 10, and we have the space for that. That's one of those programs that we just need more students to be interested in it, and we need more people to know the tremendous opportunities that are available out there. Most of our graduates in all of these career technical programs have jobs before they ever graduate. And so jobs are there. We just need more people that are interested in them.
Gary, this is Rob Rice. I wonder, in thinking through Harold's question and your reply, does ICC do a road show at high schools? Is it feasible to bring high school counselors in? It sounds like that's maybe where you would observe the disconnect. And obviously, if a motivated person comes to campus and finds you or one of your team, he or she's going to get that kind of input. Anyway, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Rob, absolutely. In non-COVID days, we typically do a tour by request from high schools every Friday. We didn't get to do that in the spring, and springs are a big time for that. We, as you know, and I see Christy Lou's on here, the career coaches through Create have just been huge for us. And so we really have tried to have a close relationship with those career coaches. We've invited them here. They've toured it. They've seen it. Many of them participated in our annual manufacturing camp that we do, so that they get some hands-on experience in some of these fields. And so they are the boots on the ground in all of these high schools, at least in the poor counties. They are the boots on the ground that are day-to-day contact with these students, that they can let me know, and they do all the time, let me know that this student is interested in this particular career field, or this student doesn't know what he's interested in. And so at least there's someone at the high school level. And I used to blame some of that on counselors, but until I talked to a counselor and actually found out what counselors do in high schools, and it is just unreal, the job task, the duties that high school counselors have. And so I don't want to lay anything at their feet. They've got a full-time job. But what we do is try to get in those high schools. And we have 2 recruiters that just last year, we moved them to more of a CTE role, so that they're still recruiting for the entire college, but they are going armed with CTE knowledge. And it was interesting. I'm just going to tell you that one real quick story about a few years ago. When I had it in my mind that that's what we wanted to do, I invited them in our manufacturing camp to go on a tour. So we toured APMM in Baldwin. And when you walk through the double doors into the plant at APMM, the first thing you'll see right there is a huge robot that picks up a car body and flings it around and sets it, from one spot to another. And so I walked through, and I just kind of looked back to make sure all the kids were in line. And that one counselor that I was trying to get moved to a CTE recruiter, his mouth was wide open. And so I walked back there to him, and I said something about catching flies. if you're not careful. And he said, man, I've seen that on the videos you've shown, but when you see it in person, and so there's something when you go to an MTD or you go to a Toyota or an APMM or some of those places, and you see that technology, and when you talk to some of those people, and you see a man there that's a maintenance technician, and he's on his iPad, he's not playing a video game, he's adjusting a PLC program on that system. And so the more we can make that happen, the more successful we'll be. The more talk, the more times, opportunities we get to speak to individuals such as yourselves, and the more that you get to talk to others and enlighten individuals. So, and I have lots of stories, and I could fill a lot more than my time, and I won't do that unless you ask me. But so I'm, as you probably can tell, I'm fairly passionate about this, and it worked for me as an 18-year-old that didn't know what I was going to do, and so I just went to work, and the company there saw some potential in me, and so they asked me if I would, consider going back to school, and so that's when I came back to school. I've never attended a college class that I wasn't working full-time hours, and then that led me to believe that I could actually do this college bit after I got my degree in tool and die. And so that tool and die degree was a stepping stone for me at the company that I worked at for 11 years, and then has been a really good career for 25 plus years here at the college. And so, I don't do that. I don't say that bragging, but just to let you know that that's what can happen with these career technical fields. And Harold Plunkett's another example of a respiratory therapist. Harold, you've never been used as an example before, had you? On the positive side, that is.
Barry, this is Zell Long, and you mentioned the career coaches. That was something I was going to bring up. I know the fantastic job. I have the honor of serving on the education committee with Create through the Wellsprings Project. And how long do you think it might be, how many years before you can see the actual results of what you're hoping to get with them being in the schools and identifying those students? And I truly believe that getting to parents, letting them see that if they're interested in their child being able to take care of themselves, that these 2-year careers that you're talking about is the way to go rather than the 4 years for all of them. So getting the parents to really start telling their children it's okay if you don't have that 4-year degree because you can make a living doing this. But what approximate time do you think before you see the results of these career coaches in the classrooms being able to funnel students into those careers?
Thank you, Zell, for that. And you're exactly right. A lot of this lies in parents. I talk to a lot of parents who just there's a roadblock there. I think we're already seeing some results. And the reason I think that is because I get to talk to these career coaches maybe more than anyone else, because they call me and say, I have a student that's interested in this, and I have a student that's interested in that, and we can get some one-on-one with that student. And many times they'll bring the student here and we'll tour them through our Belden Center. And by the way, I'll invite all of you to call me or email me, and I'd love to show you what we have here at Belden. We'll mask up and stay 6 feet apart and show you. Many of you have seen it, but until you see it, you just don't know what the technology is. And almost always, when one of those students come out here, then we can sell them, because once they see it, if they're interested in it to begin with, once they see it with their own eyes and they see students, what they're doing, in everyday classwork, then they're interested, and then it's a sale for the parent. We don't always make that sale to the parents, unfortunately. And,
right.
And I get it. I do understand that historically we've looked at a 4-year degree as being that's the benchmark that we want our kids to get to, right? And hey, I'm not saying that coming out here and getting a career education is a roadblock to that, or means you've taken this road and you can't get back to that road, because you can. I don't know if many of you know this or not, but recently IHL approved a Bachelor of Applied Science degree, which means that they can take a 2-year degree from one of our career programs, and it will transfer directly into that Bachelor of Applied Science degree. And from there, they will actually customize a degree based on what their 2-year degree's in, and what their interests are, and what their job is. And so there are lots of opportunities for them to expand and continue their education beyond this 2-year degree. And we always encourage every one of them to do that. And so that's the story we have to get out to parents. So Zell, I think the answer to your question is that we're already seeing some results. We're probably not tracking that as well. I know we're not on our end. I hope maybe the career coaches might be tracking that a little bit better. But I think that in 5 more years, I think that we'll see I think we'll see more of our students sitting in these classrooms and working on these robots and PLCs and CNC machines that actually were influenced by a career coach.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just a point to make. Probably about 15 years ago, can you still hear me? Yeah, about 15 years ago when I was, may have been longer than that, when I was directing the respiratory therapy program, we would have students come in as just really good students or candidates, and they'd say, well, Mr. Plunkett, I really want to get a 4-year degree. And so we'd lose some good students. So it's been at least 15 years ago, I talked to the folks at the University of Mississippi to create a BS degree in health science. And they were able to do that. So now when students come and they're interested either respiratory therapy or radiology or some of the other programs, but they're leaning toward a 4-year degree, we can tell them, look, come to us for 2 years. You can get your respiratory or radiology degree, and then you can get a BS degree in about 2 years online. And so that's worked out great, and I'm glad to see that there's some movement now in cooperation between the community colleges and the senior college to develop the kind of degree you're talking about, because that's something I think that will pull in students. And having that applied science background in a specific area, then that opens up those individuals to a lot of job possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a young man that I'd like to tell you a real quick story about. Our manufacturing camp came through. He wanted to be an engineer, didn't know how he was going to do it financially. He ended up, and when he graduated high school, he came to us in industrial electricity. We got him an internship at Cooper Tire, working for Jesco Maintenance. He ended up going to work for them when he graduated from us. His salary, we brought him back to talk to our manufacturing camp 2 years later, and his salary was $32 an hour. And he had just turned in his notice because he was moving to the Golden Triangle area, going to work at Packard down there for about the same salary, and was going to pursue that engineering degree at Mississippi State. And now today he is an engineer at MTD, so he fulfilled his dream. I told this story at an education summit a couple of years ago that we held here, and I asked all the manufacturers in the room, how many of you would love to have a graduating engineer who's got 6-7 years of industrial maintenance experience? I mean, it's just unreal. And he had no trouble getting a job because he understands the inner workings of how all that equipment works. And so it's absolutely I think most of these individuals that graduate will go to work. Some will go to work as a machinist and only want to be a machinist the rest of their lives. And that's great because they can make $31, $32 an hour doing that. But if they want something more, as I did, then they can continue to, continue their education, continue to get a bachelor's degree, and there will be opportunities. Manufacturing especially offers tons and tons and tons of advancement opportunities. And we believe our degree programs give them the upward mobility that they need to take advantage of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.